It's absolutely crazy that 8 years ago I started learning how to code, and today I have my own VC-backed tech startup alongside Formula One driver Jack Doohan in my dream city, Toronto, and I have my own office that I'm working out of, all because I decided to learn how to code 8 years ago. So today I'm going to take you through that entire journey, what I learned, what mistakes I made, what resources I used, what I found helpful, what I would do again. And this will include what coding languages and frameworks I learned. Basically everything I would do if I had to restart from scratch all over again. Okay, so my first ever coding languages were the classic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I actually learned that in high school by taking this Introduction to Computer Science course in grade 10. And then in that course, I actually learned to build my first ever coding project, which was this GTA adventure that I made for some preschool kid. It was my client for the class final project. So yeah, crazy to think that that shitty game is what started all of this, right? From that to building my own VC-backed startup. So if I were you and I was just starting to learn to code, I would actually also learn JavaScript. And I really recommend this video that I liked. And that's this video by Programming with Mosh. He's one of my favorite YouTubers, and it's a JavaScript course for beginners, and it takes you through everything web development related. And honestly, it's a great starting point. I then also really liked this video, this Create a React App Portfolio website. And that was actually what my first ever portfolio was, where I showcased all of my coding projects that I built out over the years. All right, now one thing I wish I knew at this stage is the only way to get better at coding is actually building something. So you can see over the last year, I've contributed 3,700 times on GitHub, and that's not even including my time at Amazon. So what you need to actually do is get your hands dirty. It's the only way you're ever actually gonna learn. So this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna go to Google and search project-based learning GitHub. Then click on that first link because it takes you through all these different coding languages, for example, JavaScript. So you could go and actually build something with your own hands and get that hands-on learning experience, which I think is the right way to learn. All right, and after that high school class, I actually did not code at all up until my first year of university. And that was one of the biggest mistakes that I've ever made, because I used to think that grades and your GPA alone is what companies would look for. So I fully prioritized that. Got a 4.0 my first semester, got into a top school in Canada. And it surprised me so much when I started looking for jobs. I couldn't find a single one. I'm talking, I wasn't even getting interviews. If I was first starting out, I would go and use the site that I built, resumex.ai, to create your own resume, and I'll touch on more of that a bit later. I was really desperate to get a job because I knew how important that first internship was. So I exhausted all of my connections, went to different career fairs, had a bunch of coffee chats, and then eventually through a referral, I got my first ever internship as a software developer for the government of Canada. It was a remote position and it was paying around $26 an hour, so I kind of lucked out there, and that propelled my career. So if you take away one thing from this, it's so clear that your network is your net worth. So go out there and talk to people, because especially with how bad the job market is nowadays, that first job could change things for you. So do not be afraid to go and ask for referrals and talk to everyone that you know. All right, and after that summer, entering second year, is when I decided it was time to take things seriously and really lock in. So I started finally doing research on what it takes to get those big tech jobs and educating myself. I didn't even know what LeetCode was up until this point. And that's when I built one of my favorite coding projects of all time. It's this Fantasy Premier League match predictor. This is a bit of this mixture of this React app. Actually, I'll just show you. It's better to show you instead of telling you. It's this React app that lets you look into all these different teams. The whole idea is I was really into FPL or fantasy sports back then. And this is super simple. The entire script is 100 lines long. I think, yeah, 93 lines long. First, I built this Premier League match predictor, which was 100 lines long. And you can see the source code for that on my GitHub. I took that predictor and made it into a points predictor for fantasy sports, connected those results into the React app. I thought that was pretty cool, and that's when I started to actually have that more impressive project on my resume, so I started to actually get a bit more interest, had a few more interviews. When I got to those interviews, I remember I actually had an interview with Amazon, the take home, the LeetCode style. I opened it and I had literally never seen a LeetCode style interview before. So I absolutely bombed it. I thought that was a generational fumble back then. And so what I did was head over to this site called neetcode.io, because they have a roadmap taking you through everything that you have to learn. and they have these solutions documented, including a video. Like, he's an absolute goat, and I swear, like, I owe him half of my salary. But unfortunately, after all of that 200 or 300 applications, I still was not good enough to get into big tech that year. I didn't get any internship that I wanted, but I ended up getting a decent job at a company called TRC where I was earning $38 an hour. So it was definitely an upgrade, and it put me in a good spot, but not quite where I wanted to be. Yeah, that was entering third year.
Before we get back to the video, I want to thank today's sponsor, Higgsfield. I just redesigned the landing page for my app, ResumeX, which has over 20,000 users, and it perfectly highlights one of the biggest shifts in software over the last few years. 8 years ago, if you could build the software, you already had an advantage. Today, anyone can vibe code an app in a weekend. The difference is whether it actually feels like a product people trust. That's something we've obsessed over with my own startup, Muse, and I wanted to bring that same level of polish to my app, ResumeX. I started by connecting Claude Fable 5 to Higgsfield's new MCP. Instead of jumping between image generators, video tools, and my editor, Claude can now analyze the page, figure out what's missing, call Higgsfield to generate new product visuals, create a cinematic hero video, iterate until everything feels cohesive, and then I could even drop all of those assets straight back into my app. What I really like is that Claude acts like the creative director while Higgsfield actually creates everything. It feels like one workflow instead of stitching together 5 different tools. I honestly think AI is making taste more important, not less. Anyone can build software now. The products that stand out are the ones that actually feel intentional. If you're building products yourself, I'd highly recommend checking out Higgsfield. Now let's get back to the video.
We just got back, and I actually remembered that I have a full-blown tutorial teaching you how to actually build out the backend of that coding project. Look at how young I look in this. This video is also now sitting at almost 100K views. Me teaching people online is what ended up getting me into that next big tech internship that I'm going to talk about, because recruiters were able to actually go and find this. So when I got hired for Spring Boot roles, which again I'm going to touch on in 2 seconds, they knew that I clearly knew what I was talking about if I'm teaching people. So either way, if you're starting out, feel free to take a look at old Eric and let him teach you a thing or two. So watch. This is me coding from scratch. Right now, I don't even know if I could do that anymore, to be honest with you, with AI. Chris, I don't know, are you able to write anything from scratch anymore?
No way.
This is the year I got my first ever big tech internship, which was at Autodesk, and it all came because I built out this project, which was a McGill exam scheduler. And again, the UI is pretty crap, so you could kind of see the project itself. The code is not as relevant. What's really important here is that this actually ended up having thousands of users at McGill use it. And right now the server is dead because I'm not trying to pay to maintain that, but you would search for your course code and add your exam schedules directly to your Google Calendar. Because at McGill you just have like this massive 40-page long PDF with all the exams thrown there, and it was a pain in the ass to figure out when you actually had to write your exam and where. So that was a problem that I wanted to solve, so I built a solution for it, threw it on my LinkedIn, and ended up having quite a few people use it at McGill. I actually got into deep discussions with McGill to incorporate this into their own software, and then I just got too lazy. I kind of just stopped with that. When I talked about this in my interviews with Autodesk and eventually Amazon as well, they were really impressed with the fact that I identified a problem and built a solution to solve it that was also able to scale to thousands of people. Now, how did I actually learn to build this kind of stuff? First, in university, I learned Java, and most importantly is Spring Boot for backend development. And Java and Spring Boot are used a lot in big tech, especially at Amazon. It was 80% of their existing code base. And this is because a bunch of old legacy systems run on Java and Spring Boot. So to learn this, what I did, and I still recommend to this day, is going to Amigos Code on YouTube, because he's the absolute GOAT for Spring Boot. I remember watching some of his courses, especially on JWT, authentication, and just all the small stuff that you wouldn't think about. Even on my Swear It Codes channel, I watched the full Java tutorial for beginners in 2023, and this Java tutorial with complete user login and registration backend stuff, because that's the kind of work that you'll be doing on the job. So getting familiar with that early on is great. Now, to actually build projects that are that next caliber, I highly recommend going to buildyourOwnX.vercel.app. Find that coding language that you just learned, let's say Java, and then build any of these more intensive coding projects like a 3D renderer, because this teaches you way more in depth and takes you to that next level of software engineering, which I find is required to take that next step. Now is when things start to get a bit more serious with coding, and I really started to get my hands dirty with a bunch of projects. One of the coolest was this work I did with the Canadian Space Agency, which was building this satellite collision predictor. Basically set up this alerting system where if these satellites would get close enough where the potential of collisions was high enough that hit this certain threshold, you would want to notify all of the engineers in a certain area. So we would just send these like text messages or text alarms, kind of like how on-call works. Then another project I built, which was a great talking point on my resume, was my first ever startup, which was Empor, and that's Canada's first ever student exclusive marketplace. We ended up winning the McGill Sustainability Grant for a couple $1,000, had around 5,000 users in McGill, had thousands of dollars in sales, and that was all built with React Native and Expo Go. I went through the whole process of putting an app on the App Store and scaling it, again with the Spring Boot backend, because I used to love Spring Boot back then. Obviously, when I talked about that in interviews, especially the Amazon interview, the recruiters were so impressed. And I personally think that experience is what got me my Amazon job. And yeah, it's so clear that if you want to start getting into those high six-figure jobs, especially with how AI works, and you'll be surprised what you're actually able to ship after you keep putting in those hours and that effort. Obviously, all of that is when I started to get the attention from the big tech companies. I applied to around 350 software engineering internships in my 4th year of university. And what I would do for these interviews is go to this site called seanprashad.com/leetcodepatterns, because you could search for your different companies like Amazon, and you could see all of the recently asked interview questions, like this course schedule interview question, which is very common, because then you could go ahead and practice that solution so that on the interview, you're not surprised with the new interview question. You already know what to answer. That is a cheat code that not a lot of people know about. And then from a behavioral section, you use the STAR method, which stands for situation, task, action, result. And you just talk about what I just talked about, your coding projects, your experience, and the impact that that has, and why you would fit into X big tech companies' leadership principles. All right, and that brings me to 21, where I worked out of the Amazon office in Toronto as a software engineering intern. And I thought that that was the pinnacle of my career at the time, where I was so excited to have that job. And I was going all out to get that return offer. It was in office every single day from at least 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., really putting my all into it. I was working with Java again, and notably TypeScript. That was my first time getting any sort of experience with TypeScript. I had to teach myself the differences. And notably, we were working with the AWS CDK, which stands for the Cloud Development Kit. That lets you work with infrastructure as code in the cloud. The only issue was everything I was doing was internal code. So nothing, it was an internal tool that wasn't user facing, and there was no career progression to get me writing code that would impact thousands of people, and that was what I fell in love with originally. And I wasn't sure if it's what I wanted to do long term, but at the end of the year, I did get that return offer, and I was so happy because it felt like after all those years of hard work, I finally achieved that big tech job. And yeah, I was on top of the world at that moment. All right, then right after that internship, I really craved that feeling of building something again that impacts people. And also I wanted to test my coding skills and try to build something that would actually generate revenue, because that was that next step. So I ended up building this app, ResumeMax. And it started as just a simple AI resume generator and has now scaled into an all-in-one kind of AI job searching tool where you could tailor your resume to every role, actually find roles worth applying to. You could track which version of the resume actually gets you those interviews, all the way to the point where you get to negotiate the offer you earned, because a lot of people leave money on the table not knowing how much these salaries can actually be negotiated. And as of right now, we've had 16,000 users and $18,000 in revenue and counting. And we are still at a monthly recurring revenue of $1,300. All right, and building all of that in public got the attention of Jack Doohan. So we hopped on a call, talked about what was then Prompt Shop, now Muse. And honestly, when I heard that opportunity, I was like almost immediately all in. Like at that point, I didn't actually have the Amazon return offer in my hands. And then around March, I was in LA meeting some of the team members for a strategic trip, and I got the official email from Amazon, and I ended up turning it down, and that was both one of the most exciting and one of the scariest moments of my life because I was going all in on myself, betting on myself. So far it's worked out pretty well, you know, fingers crossed that I do feel like I made the right decision. I'm super excited to be here and working on this. I'm putting in 16 hours of work every single day and I love it. Like I love what I do. Yeah, that's 8 years of coding. Brought me here to this point where I'm now 22. I own my own company in my dream city and really the sky's the limit. So let's see where the future takes us.